Welcome back, guys. Doc May Diet Podcast, episode number 15. Tonight's topic, we're going to be discussing the importance of sleep. So sleep is definitely something I've brought up multiple times before, mainly in regards to stress reduction, but sleep has a lot of other benefits besides that. So that's what we're going to get into. So before we get into the benefits and why it's important, let's talk about why do we sleep to begin with? Well, why we sleep has been a question that has really stumbled doctors for quite a while now, for centuries, because evolutionarily speaking, why we sleep makes no sense whatsoever, because when we're sleeping, we're laying down, we're obviously not awake, and therefore we're way more vulnerable to attack, vulnerable to, being killed or having our village robbed, going back into our ancestral days. So why do we sleep? Well, there's a few theories, and a lot of them are older, have been kicked to the curb, and we have some new ones we're going to get into in a second. But obviously, there's a short list of things that we absolutely need to do in order to survive. Those include eating, drinking water, breathing, and guess what? Sleeping. So obviously, sleep is super important. And over 45% of the U.S. population is still chronically sleep deprived. So that makes it an even more relevant topic of conversation. So the first theory of why we need to sleep is that basically it was called the boredom sleep theory, that we just needed something to do to pass the time. Once we got all our chores done, we ate, we took care of the village, took care of our kids, and then at the end of the day, nothing else to do, our bodies kind of just shut down. Now, obviously, we don't believe that theory anymore. Another older theory would be the energy conservation theory, which stated that basically if we were awake too often, we would need to eat too much food, and then we'd run out of food, so our bodies naturally shut down to conserve energy. Now, those two theories, like I said, aren't very popular anymore. The most popular theory is the restorative theory of sleep, which is one that's probably pretty commonplace and will make a lot of sense. So basically, all the restorative processes of our body, the tissue repair, the DNA synthesis, the protein synthesis, the muscle growth, all that stuff happens when we're sleeping. Another part of that hypothesis is there's a chemical byproduct known as adenosine, which you might recognize from adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which gives us our energy. Adenosine is the byproduct of this brain cell activity. And when adenosine levels rise too high, that's when we start to feel tired and we start to feel weak and weary and that we need to go to sleep. Now, side note, caffeine actually blocks the effects of adenosine, which is why when we drink coffee and caffeinated beverages, we have those feelings of fatigue blocked. But sleep is really the only time that our body is able to wash all that adenosine through our cerebral spinal fluid so we no longer feel tired. Okay, so the restorative theory of sleep is most likely the one that we have as our answer, but to be honest, we're never going to get a definitive answer as to why. It's an unanswerable question at this point. But all we need to do is look at what happens when we don't sleep to realize that sleep is extremely important and absolutely vital to our health. So without further ado, let's get into 5 of the top reasons that sleep is super important. So number one reason sleep is super important is sleep's relationship to fat loss. So when we sleep, well, actually, let's look at when we don't sleep. When we don't sleep, our body actually increases the production of a hormone known as ghrelin, which is actually the hunger hormone. This hormone makes us hungry. And then it also decreases the production of the hormone known as leptin. Leptin allows us to feel full and satiated so we don't get hungry. So right off the bat, more hunger, less feelings of being satisfied, boom, recipe for disaster. That's the recipe for weight gain right there. Now, the second component to this fat loss and lack of sleep relationship is that when we don't sleep, obviously we're not going to have as much energy the next day. So guess what? We're not going to move as much. Now, we may still hit our workout, we may stay in our same routine, but that non-exercise activity, that NEAT is what it stands for, is going to be much lower by default because we're going to have less energy to expend. And then the third reason of sleep's importance in relationship to fat loss is the fact that our body is also going to release cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It'll cause fat storage, and fat storage more specifically around the abdomen, which is not good. Okay, Reason number 2 why sleep is so important is its relationship to muscle gain. So in addition to cortisol causing us to store fat around the abdomen, cortisol will also cause muscle breakdown and muscle atrophy, and it'll also reduce our levels of testosterone, which is super important for building muscle. In addition to that, increase in cortisol will inhibit our insulin sensitivity, so we become insulin insensitive. And in addition to building muscle, which becomes impossible when you're insulin insensitive, it also leads you down the path of many other diseases, namely type 2 diabetes. So insulin sensitivity, another huge component of sleep deprivation. And then the third component of muscle gain and sleep and that relationship there is that at nighttime we release growth hormone and insulin-like growth hormone, which helps shuttle carbohydrates into the cells, helps our body recover from these long workouts we're doing, these muscle building workouts, and helps utilize those carbs. So sleep is basically our body's chance to relax, recover, and allow us to head into that next workout faster and more efficiently. Now, reason number 3 sleep's so important is its relationship to the immune system. So a study found that people who sleep less than 7 hours per night are 3 times more likely to come down with a common cold than people who get more than 7 hours. And the reason for that is that sleep has a huge impact on the very function of our immune system cells, aka the T cells. Now, these T cells are fighter cells of our immune system, and they help ward off viruses and help ward off other diseases, namely cancer. Now, the reason for this is that researchers have shown that when we're sleeping and our body's at rest, different components of our immune system actually communicate with each other. They talk to one another, and what they do is they build up immune system memory. So next time our body encounters a specific antigen or a pathogen, the immune system already knows what to do. It already has that memory. So basically, the way I like to think of our immune system is as the army or the military. And when we're sleeping, I like to think that the troops are sleeping, but the generals are awake, and they're calling each other, and they're talking to each other, and they're putting together a strategy. If we don't sleep, this doesn't happen. But while we sleep, different components of the immune system speak to one another and build up that memory and build that strategy. So next time our body encounters that specific antigen or pathogen, it can fire the defenses, and it knows exactly what to do, and that way we don't get sick. Or if we do get sick, we get out of our systems much faster and much more efficiently. Reason number 4 sleep is so important has to be its relationship to inflammation. So inflammation is heavily tied to our circadian rhythm, our wake and sleep cycle. Now, a 2016 study showed that it reviewed over 70 different studies, which showed that people who slept less than 7 hours a night had higher levels of C-reactive protein, which is a common inflammatory marker. However, just as not enough sleep will cause inflammation, so will too much sleep. Another study showed that people who slept over 9 hours also had higher levels of tumor necrosis factor and interleukin-1, other pro-inflammatory markers. So the key here is to keep a consistent sleep schedule. You want to try and go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. That way we keep our circadian rhythm in check, and we also keep inflammation in check. Now, the amount of sleep that we need, there is no one ideal answer. It does vary person to person, but generally speaking, you want to shoot between 7 to 9 hours to keep that inflammation in check. Okay, last reason on this list at least that sleep is so important is its relationship to longevity. So something that's very popular right now is the topic of telomeres. Now, what are telomeres? Telomeres are the caps at the end of our chromosomes that help protect the tips of the chromosomes from fraying like electrical wires and also brushing up and getting damaged by other chromosome tips. The best way to think of what a telomere is that it's actually the plastic cap at the end of a shoelace holding that lace together. Now, there's been multiple studies and mounting amount of evidence supporting the hypothesis that longer telomere length equals longevity, longer life. And we've actually seen this in animal studies. The animals with longer telomere length, they live longer, and they also have more protection from tumor cell formation. The animals with shorter telomeres, guess what? don't live as long and, develop disease quicker. So what increases telomere length? Sleep. A study showed that those who slept 7 or more hours per night, guess what? Had longer telomeres. And that includes adults, the elderly, even children. Those who get 7 or even 6 or less than that, guess what? Shorter telomere length, which we now know correlates with shorter lifespan and more prone to disease. So even beyond the telomere conversation, sleep is going to protect us from cancer, heart disease, diabetes. Guess what those are? Those are the 3 top disease killers in this country. So the more we sleep, the more protection we get from these diseases, and that in itself is going to enable us to live longer. Okay, so in review, 5 of the top reasons that sleep is so important. Number 1, for fat loss. Number 2, for muscle gain. Number 3, for immune system function. Number 4, for inflammation. Number 5, for longevity. So those are just 5 reasons why sleep is so important. There's plenty of other ones, but if those 5 aren't enough to convince you that sleep's important, then I don't know what will. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next time. Go ahead, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.